Good afternoon. Good afternoon or morning, depending on your location. I want to thank you for joining today's webinar, Digital Literacy in Adult Education. My name is Gary Gonzalez. I'll be providing any technological assistance should you need it. Before I turn things over to our moderator, Marcelo Movet, I'm going to quickly review some logistics around how I'll be handling questions. First and foremost, you have the ability to type in any questions at any point in the chat. Also, your audio has been muted. There will be a couple of sections where you'll be able to raise your hand and unmute your line if you so choose. But like I said, you can always type into the chat any questions or comments that you might have. We are recording, and the American Institute for Research allows for the recording of audio, visuals, participants, and other information sent, verbalized, or utilized during business-related meetings. By joining a meeting, you automatically consent to such recordings. Any participant who prefers to participate via audio only should disable their video camera, so only their audio will be captured. Video and/or audio recordings of any AIR session shall not be transmitted to an external third party without the permission of AIR. All right, having said that, I'd like to turn things over now to Marcella. Marcella, take it away.
Great. Thanks so much, Gary. And thanks to all of you for joining us today. We're so excited to have you here. For those of you who have joined us for previous webinars, you know that today's webinar is part of the Universal TA that we are offering through Links. We like to call this our Wednesday webinar series. This is our third in our series. And our topic today is digital literacy in adult education. And with us, we have one of the experts in the field in this topic. So I'm very pleased to introduce to all of you, Kathy Harris. Kathy, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Marcella. So, hi everybody, my name is Kathy Harris. I'm with Portland State University in the Department of Applied Linguistics, and I'm with the Literacy, Language, and Technology Research Group. And I'm very excited to be with you all today, talking about some of my favorite topics. I will ask if I get talking too fast, because these are my favorite topics. Please let me know, and I'll try to slow down to be as comprehensible as I can. Okay, so let's take this away. All right, so this is our agenda for today. So we're going to start by talking about what is digital literacy really, and we'll unpack the definition because it impacts how we need to think about digital literacy in adult education. Then we'll talk about digital inclusion and why that's so important in adult education. We'll talk about issues beyond digital literacy to include digital access, access to the internet, and access to devices. We'll talk about how people acquire digital literacy, and I'll present some information from a study about how people learn digital literacy skills, digital skills. And then we'll bring all that together to talk about how states and programs can support digital literacy acquisition. Now, in several places, I'll stop and ask you to share your expertise. You've all had experiences that are very valuable, and you're all a huge resource to each other. So I just want to let you know that that's coming. And what we're going to be doing is we will go ahead and collect those and make them available to you, so you can see each other's advice and each other's experience. And that's an expertise that's really valuable. At the very end, I'm going to turn it over to Marcella, who is going to ask you about next month's webinar and think about how to, what kinds of questions you might have on that topic. Okay, so let's get started. So what is digital literacy really? I mean, I think everybody has a sense of what digital literacy is, but I think it's important to unpack it a little bit. And because I'm a teacher, and I'll do my teacher thing here, let's start with what you all already know. Using the chat, what I'd like you to do is to start listing all of the things that you do in a day that are digital. Start with a moment that you wake up. For me, I would say my phone is my alarm. So I want you to start just putting in, and let's get all the things, just in a popcorn fashion, all the things that you can think of that you do in a day that are digital. Ready, set, go. Type as fast as you can. All right, I have another device. I'm going to be looking at what you guys have got with the chat here. Oh. Maybe I'm not going to be able to do that on that device. It doesn't seem to want to let me in. Oh, good. We got 29 things, but now I want to see what they are. There we go. Okay, daily Google update. Silly pics to my brother. Awesome. Yep. Watch schedule timer traffic updates. Of course, traffic updates are really important. Turn on NPR. Stream my workout. Oh yeah, especially during COVID. Oh yeah. Ask Siri for directions. A lot of directions. Read the news. Right. Email colleagues. I don't know. I do that sometimes before I get out of bed. Email colleagues. Sweet. Just keep going. What about later in the day? What about in the afternoon? What about in the evening? What do you all do in the evening? Podcasts, right? Texting and actually calling people, right? We can do that. Playing music while I cook, watching videos while you cook, getting recipes, right? Pinterest for recipes, streaming TV, Duolingo, right? We can learn as we go, as we're cooking, doing games, etc. Yeah, keep going. Awesome. 60 things, all the different kinds of things people need to do. The fishing forecast, that's amazing. I haven't heard that one before. How many people bank online, right? We do our banking online. How many people have to check their calendar to see what am I doing tomorrow? Oh yeah, reading the book on the reader, paying bills, reading your reader. Yep, doing different kind of navigational things. Awesome. Excellent. Scheduling a doctor's appointment. Right, absolutely. There are so many different things. Feel free to keep going, but this is great. There are so many different things that people do in a day that are digital. So let's start, let's dig into what this means a little bit. Okay, so the official Octave definition of digital literacy, which comes from the IMLS definition, is digital literacy is the skills associated with using technology to enable users to find, evaluate, organize, create, and communicate information. So when we break that down, we start with basic digital skills. And these are the things that people often think about when they think about digital literacy. Things like the ability to turn on a device, the ability to open an app or a program, find a file, save a file, read an email, send an email, add an attachment to an email, use a keyboard plus mouse, trackpad, or touchscreen, or other input method. These are all basic digital skills. Open a browser, open a tab, use tabbed browsing. These are all basic digital skills. In addition to these basic digital skills, digital literacy is also the ability to create and communicate information. So the ability to write an email, post on a blog, fill out a form, send a text, use a chat for, say, product support, right? For a long time, we considered that ABE students needed to be have relatively passive digital skills to be able to get information, right? But now these days, our students need to be able to be information creators, right? They need to be able to make YouTube videos or create and disseminate music, create and post music, write blogs, use social media in activist activities. So there's all kinds of things people need to not just write an email, but to be active in their communities, right? So this falls under create and communicate information. All right, so digital literacy includes these basic skills, creating and communicating information, and also, which includes the first two, find and evaluate information, which we often call information literacy. As you all know, the ability to find, this is the ability to find information that you're looking for, and the ability to judge its veracity. Is this true? Do I think it's true? What perspective is it? Is there a bias? So the ability to evaluate information. This could be health information, product information, job information, information about school, etc. What sometimes people forget about this is that these three things are relatively language independent. Once you know how to do these things in whatever language you're using, you know how to use them, right? You know how to do them. So they're kind of language. It's really important to remember English learners may be able to do this in the language that they speak already and have these skills. And they may not, but they might. So the last aspect of digital literacy is digital problem solving. And this is the one that sometimes people haven't thought about so much. This encompasses all the others that we've talked about: basic digital skills, the ability to create and communicate information, finding and evaluate information. All that's encompassed within the digital problem solving. So digital problem solving is the ability to solve problems in digital environments. And often the technology itself is one of the problems. So for example, it could be combining information from a variety of sources of information. So if a person wants to create a spreadsheet comparing product information on two, say, things that a person wants to buy, that's an example of a problem-solving activity. A more complex but common problem that people have to solve is looking to buy affordable internet access. So for example, the person might need to use a mapping program to find out if their neighborhood or their street is in the service area of an internet service provider. They might need to use the internet service provider's website to look at cost, speed, and data caps. Then they might need to look at their own or their child's schooling to find out what are the data needs for remote schooling or online school and match those all up together. Combining all of this information to solve the problem of finding an internet service provider uses information from various sources. And that's an example of digital problem solving. Then you might add the complication that the website is out of date, right? Because these things go out of date quickly. Or there's a new program coming out that isn't yet known. There's not a lot known about it. For example, the emergency broadband benefit that launched a couple of weeks ago. It makes comparing internet service providers a little bit more complicated. So these are the kinds of things to think about in digital problem solving. So an official definition, so a working definition of digital problem solving is the ability to navigate and use multiple digital resources in order to accomplish one's goals in multiple domains, including professional work, personal interests, educational pursuits, social or professional networking, civic areas, and key for future uses we have not yet conceptualized. And that's something we're going to keep coming back to in this presentation. For future uses we have not yet conceptualized. That's a key component of digital literacy. So digital problem solving is multifaceted and with several intersecting layers that move beyond cognitive skills into affective and motivational domains as well, and moving across both well-structured and less structured tasks, right? So I gave it 2 examples of problem-solving tasks. One just collecting 2 kinds of information, but another fairly complex. And I would argue that task complexity in the real world shifts as we move from moment to moment. Now, let's put the definition of digital problem solving into some different areas of life and think about so you can start by thinking about all the things that were put in the chat. We had like 69 different things that people do that are all the different things that people do in their life, right? So let's look at that a little bit. All right, so let's take 4 domains: your child's education, employment, education and training, and health. So let's take these 4 domains as examples. So when thinking about the digital literacy needs in dealing with your child's education, enrolling children in school is now a digital task, as is communicating with the teacher through the school website, secure messaging system, email, or other format, right? That needs to be digital most of the time now. Finding and reading the school calendar is a digital task. Helping a child with homework or supporting them in online school requires elements of digital literacy. In the setting of employment, filling out personal forms is almost always online now. Searching for a job and applying for a job is almost always online. Communicating at work, presenting to colleagues and clients, these are all digital tasks that need the digital literacy in order to do. In education and training, and enrolling oneself in school, doing group work, doing research that's required for your school, and class presentations. These are all things that are done digitally today. In the realm of health, filling out medical forms is digital. Getting accurate health information is digital. Communicating with providers or accessing the patient portal, where that you would need digital skills for certain. And since the era of COVID, using the patient portal and having remote access to providers has become more important than ever. And these all require digital skills. And these are digital skills done in domains of life. They're not random digital skills. They're not decontextualized. They're contextualized within the thing that's needed to be accomplished. Okay, so now what I want to do is kind of show you that these are skills that relate to language skills, the kinds of language and literacy skills that are already in our ABE classes. So these language and literacy skills are a big part of the digital literacy that's required for daily life. For example, communicating with a child's teacher requires writing skills, as does communicating at work, communicating with healthcare providers, and so on. Reading skills are required for searching for jobs, conducting research, and getting accurate health information. That's all requires strong reading skills, another thing that we have that we really focus on in adult education. And one of the things that research is showing is that reading online has some key differences from reading physical materials. And I think it's just so interesting, and you'll think differently about reading as soon as I tell you what this means. When you read online, you're looking at a website or you're looking at a page and you're seeing all kinds of supplemental information. It might be links to resources. It might be links to definitions. It might be links to additional information. So what each individual reader does is decide, and then there's advertisements and other things that are flashing at you, right? What each individual reader does is pick which links to follow and then continue to pick which links to follow and whether or not they're going to come back to the original material. Are they coming back? So in many ways, reading online is authoring your own reading experience. And that has implications for classrooms, right? So people are reading and each person in your class may be reading something different if it's an online reading experience. And that's part of how we need to think about reading in an online context, is that each person authors their own reading in many respects by selecting where they go next, whether that's a black hole or whether you come back to the original reading material. And finally, let me just make sure that last one popped up. There it is, yeah. The ability to read and think critically is a digital literacy that's required for life. For example, getting accurate health information involves critically reading and evaluating information, as I've already said. And most recently, collaborating with others in digital environments has become an important skill. So add collaboration to all of these. For example, a virtual work group in an education setting. We're doing that more and more, and that's becoming more and more a digital skill that people need to have. These are all skills that are infused across ABE programs, but are in a digital form. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to do a little bit of myth busting before we move on. We might think of digital natives, those who grew up using technology, as being really good at using technology. On the other hand, digital immigrants, those who learn how to use technology later in life, can really struggle to learn how to do things with technology. And both parts of those statements are problematic. And the reason I bring this up is because I think these are assumptions and beliefs underlying policies that we make, procedures we put in place that we need to really problematize. So for example, digital natives aren't as good at technology as people think. People think that adolescents and young adults in the United States have strong digital skills, but the PIAAC International Survey of Adult Skills, which surveyed and assessed adults in 24 industrialized countries, and included digital literacy, and the digital literacy has levels of below level 1, level 2, and level 3. Results show that among young adults ages 16 to 24, the US has one of the lowest shares, 17th, of young adults performing at level 2 or 3 in problem solving in technology environments. This is a measure of digital literacy. So what that tells us then is that even what people who are thought of as digital natives, which is a term that's not a useful term, but are not necessarily, you can't assume they have strong digital skills. So young people may not, often don't. They might be really good at finding music or videos. They might be very good at learning looking at YouTube videos on how to learn things, but that doesn't mean that they can do the complex tasks they need to be able to do with strong digital skills. And on the other end of the spectrum, the other end of the age range, digital immigrants are using technology in many different ways. Younger, higher income, and more highly educated seniors use the internet and broadband at rates approaching or even exceeding the general population. So these have been called the silver surfers by the Pew Research people. They are online and online more. They use the internet a lot. Many are online daily. And although less than the general population, silver surfers use social media. 34% of older adults use social media, at least sometimes. And now we know that technology use among seniors varies by education, income, and age. But the point here is that the concepts of digital native and digital immigrant is not accurate and should not guide our state policies or our programs. All right. So coming into to kind of bringing this together a little bit on digital literacy. So as we finish our tour of digital literacy and what it means, let me propose that digital literacy is a continuum. And actually, Steve Reeder, some of you know his work. He's the one who suggested this to me a couple of years ago. Digital literacy is a continuum that goes from powering up a device, sending a text message, reading a web page, or creating and saving a document, making an audio recording, searching for information online, to making a multimedia document, or collaborating online, solving problems in technology-rich environments the way I described. And then emerging things that we don't know about yet. We have that again, these things, emerging things we don't know about yet. The digital literacy, and this is really important, the digital literacy continuum has a moving endpoint. Technology and what we do with it is constantly changing. Even a few years ago, could you have imagined being able to watch your food delivery on your phone as the driver moved through the city towards you? Could you have imagined even a couple of years ago that you'd be able to do that? This is an example of the moving endpoint of the digital literacy continuum. And what it means is that it requires a mindset that what you've learned will be constantly changing. For example, you sign onto your computer and Microsoft Word has an update, or your operating system has an update. All of a sudden, you've got to go find where those things are that you need, or are they done differently now? And that's a problem to be solved. It's something you've got to figure out. It requires a kind of, you could call it a growth mindset or a discovery mindset. This idea of, oh, it's going to change. It always changes. That's part of digital literacy, is this idea that it continually changes and you're going to have to figure out what to do now. So why is this important? It's important because with technology, everyone is a learner. It's not possible for anyone to know everything about digital literacy. It's always changing. And there are a lot of implications of this for instruction, curriculum, and programs, and the way we need to think about digital literacy. We need to move, and we have. I think people are moving from being kind of the sage on the stage kind of instruction to the guide on the side kind of instruction, where different people in the area, where knowledge is distributed, different people know different things about what we're trying to accomplish. And that is an important aspect of digital literacy, is that no, it's not possible for any one person to know it all. So it can't be something that is responsible for the teacher to disseminate the knowledge that he or she knows. Because it's always changing. Okay, so perfect. I'm right on schedule. All right, so that's the first thing I really wanted to think through. That was the first part of our agenda. What is digital literacy exactly? And there's some important things to think about in that. Now let's talk a little bit about digital inclusion and why it's important in adult education. So digital literacy is one of three legs of the digital inclusion stool. Access to the internet is one, access to devices is another, and the skills to use both is the third. And those are the three-legged stools of digital inclusion. And digital inclusion is important in adult education because a significant number of adults do not have the resources or skills to take advantage of the digital age. For example, they don't have the skills or the resources to participate in distance learning or telemedicine or extend their learning using online resources. Okay, so let me move into another part of what this means. The Pew Research in 2020 and 2021 shows that while 93% of US adults use the internet, how they access the internet reveals inequity related to income, race, and education, which is, again, another thing that we need to pay attention to in adult education. So let's bust the myth that everyone has convenient and affordable access to the internet. And we'll look at who has home broadband by education. So to start with, the background here is that 77% of Americans have home broadband in 2021. Now, broadband is internet access that's always on, so that's as opposed to cell phone data that's on and off. Always on and with a certain speed. What the speed is, it depends on kind of when you're talking, but at least it's faster than dial-up. That's a whole nother topic. We can talk about it another time. But let's break this down by level of educational attainment. So among people with less than a high school diploma, 46% have home broadband. Among people that are high school graduates, 59% have home broadband. If you have some college, 80% have home broadband, and college graduates, among them, 94% have home broadband. So many of the students that we serve in adult education programs are the individuals who need support to get home broadband and devices, as well as the digital literacy to do the things that they need to be able to do with them. Okay, let's talk a little bit about being smartphone dependent. People who don't have home broadband, but who do use the internet on their smartphone are called smartphone dependent. They rely on their smartphones and cell data for their access to the internet, and they might use prepaid data or monthly plans or go to public Wi-Fi spots. But let's look at who is smartphone dependent by education. So among people with less than a high school diploma, 32% are smartphone dependent. Among high school graduates, 24% are smartphone dependent. Among people with some college, 16% are smartphone dependent, and among college graduates, 4% are smartphone dependent. Again, the students that we serve in adult education are more likely to be smartphone dependent. But you might ask, why is that a problem? Well, there's lots of reasons why that's a problem. First of all, it's often the data that accessing the internet using cell phone data is often more expensive. It isn't always, but it is often more expensive. And for people with lower income, it is frequently more expensive. And second, there are many things that are difficult to do with a smartphone as compared to a computer or a tablet. And as you all know, the homework problem, try writing a paper, writing even a memo or an email is much more difficult on a small screen. Filling out certain kinds of forms, reading complex legal or other kinds of complex information, these things are much more difficult on the small screen. But third, and maybe most importantly, is the pattern of smartphone dependence reveals racial inequity. So access to the internet is a racial equity issue. As you can see on this graph, Hispanics have less home broadband and a higher level of smartphone dependence, followed by Blacks, then whites. So access to the internet is a racial equity issue because of systemic factors such as digital redlining and slower and more expensive broadband in Black and Hispanic neighborhoods, and of course, income, right, which is also related to race. So another reason to really pay attention to to digital inclusion is for racial equity. So there are some consequences of smartphone dependence. And I want to give you an illustration that comes from my own state. These are data collected in December of 2020 among families in Oregon who are low-income families with young children. These are WIC participants. And these data reveal that while 56%, that's the yellow, 56% of people never run out of data on their cell phones because they're smartphone dependent, 18% run out every month, 14% run out of data every few months, and 12% run out of data a few times a year. This means that 44% of these low-income families with young children run out of data periodically, and that's a lot of people. That means for those individuals, their participation in distance education or their engagement with supplemental learning resources, their ability to support their kids' access to remote instruction, among many, many other things that we've all talked about today so far, that is interrupted regularly. We also found that nearly half of all respondents had to go to alternative spaces to access the internet sometimes. These places included libraries, retail parking lots, that was a common one. Going to the Walmart parking lot was a very common way to get internet access, to get Wi-Fi, with free Wi-Fi, in the homes of friends or relatives. But running out of data and having to creatively access the internet are some of the consequences of smartphone dependence that impact many of our adult education students and make things more difficult so that they're not on a level playing field when it comes to trying to do their schoolwork, trying to learn or do other things. So I sometimes hear teachers and program administrators talking about how they hesitate to bring digital literacy into their classes and programs because not all students have affordable access to the internet, which we know is true, right? We know that's true. So what can states and programs do about access? Well, I want to talk about a couple different things people can think about. One is digital navigators and the other one is partnerships. So I'll talk about digital navigators first. So digital navigator programs are becoming more common in many areas. A digital navigator can help students find an affordable home broadband program, connect students to affordable devices, or connect students to tutoring, or be a digital literacy tutor. So that's all the different things a digital navigator can be. The digital navigator role can map onto many different organizational roles. You see them in health education, you see them with career navigators, you see them with student support services, housing support services. So there's lots of different kinds of places that the digital navigator can be, but the idea is this person helps to solve the access problem and connects people to things. So here I've given you an image of the Digital Navigator Toolkit by Digital Us. It's a group of a whole bunch of different organizations working on this. And this link is on the PDF. The PDF. Gary, have you put the PDF in the chat yet?
Yes,
Yes.
it is in the chat.
Excellent. So for all of you, what we did as we prepared this webinar is we put together a PDF with all the different links that I'm talking about. And so this link, this is one of them that's on your PDF. So this Digital Navigator Toolkit includes a toolkit overview, digital navigators that connect to opportunity, why start a digital navigator program, starting a digital navigator program. Sorry, I can't read my own writing. Program goals, program descriptions, measurement and evaluation, implementation plan, and building an ecosystem for digital resilience. The National Digital Inclusion Alliance also has a page talking about different ways to have digital navigator programs, and that's linked in your PDF. And then the second thing, so the idea that states can create digital navigator programs is one of the ways for states and programs to think about addressing the digital inclusion issue in their programs. Another is to partner with a community digital inclusion program. And on the National Digital Inclusion website, which is on your linked on your PDF, are a list of digital inclusion programs in your area. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of digital inclusion programs listed on the NDIA website, and you're sure to find potential partners on that list. So partnering is another way to do it, depending on your state and how things work in your state. Okay, now we're going to come to one of those places where we want you to share your expertise. Let's tap into your own expertise that you can share with your colleagues. So reflect and respond on your past experience. Please put in the chat, have you seen the answers to these? Have you seen the adult basic education programs that respond to the needs to help students with internet access? And what types of programs have been successful? Now, while we're going to give you 4 minutes, so I'm going to try to shut up. That's not always easy for me, but I'm going to be a little bit quiet so that you can really think and give your colleagues benefit of your knowledge and experience. And what we will do is we will take this information, we will clean it up, put it in a format that passes our own inspections, and then make it available with this webinar. So it's worth giving each other some time, because you guys have a lot of expertise to share. So let's focus on how have you seen programs and states respond to the need to help students with internet access, and what types of programs have been successful. There are 61 people on this call, and I think there's probably some gold among you. So do that. I'm starting to see stuff on the chat. This is also an opportunity if you want to ask me a question. I know I said I would be quiet. But if there's questions, while people are putting some stuff in the chat, I would be happy to answer questions. You can either put the question in the chat and Gary or Marcella will forward that to me, or you can raise your hand and then either Gary can unmute you or you can unmute yourself.
So just to reiterate what Kathy has said, if you'd like to jump on the line, raise your hand using the reactions option at the bottom of the Zoom window, or just type into the chat that you'd like to be called upon, and you'll be able to unmute your line.
Yeah, there's some good stuff in there already in the chat. Good suggestions. Excellent. Yeah, this is great. Some really, really nice ideas, programs that people are trying. You can really tell people are trying, they're trying really hard to meet this need. Oh, good. North Carolina is piloting the use of digital navigators. Awesome. All right, let's just take another minute or so. Any other ideas people want to give? Yeah, Beverly, that's great. Thank you so much. Excellent. Excellent. Really good ideas. All right. So I'm going to keep going, but as people think of things, do put them in the chat because it's such a great resource. You all have experience that each other needs to share in. And then if you want to, you can also put in things that didn't work. Now that I don't have a slide to stop, but sometimes what you learn from the things that didn't work is as valuable as the things that did. All righty, so good, we're on schedule. All right, so now I want to talk about how do people acquire digital literacy. So there's been some good research about how people learn digital literacy, especially those who don't have strong literacy skills or who have had difficult experiences with formal learning. And I'm going to describe one of those studies because there are some important lessons for us in the findings. Okay, so the study is the Digital Literacy Acquisition Project, which was a BTOP or Broadband Technology Opportunities Program. It was a national program, a national project. And this particular one took place in 10 states and 100 sites, worked with more than 12,000 adult learners across those 100 sites, plus program staff and teachers and tutors. It used online learning materials for a combination of self-study and facilitated learning. And it had many different models. I'm going to talk more about that. Each site used a model that worked in their context. Context included adult education, libraries, K-12 schools, affordable housing organizations, community-based organizations, and many more. And I'll give you just a sneak peek of the findings. Human helpers are important. Opportunities to learn independently and discover and make mistakes are important. Relevance is important. Access to devices as people learn is important. So these are some of the things I'm just giving you the sneak peek. Okay, so this digital literacy acquisition included flexible learning situations from individualized attention from tutors to peer interactions and everything in between. So the many different situations, these 100 different situations included scheduled classes led by teachers, one-on-one tutoring, many-to-one tutoring. This one was pretty common where you had a bunch of people working on self-access materials with what we called a busy bee model, where there were a couple helpers who would wander around and help those who needed and go to people who needed help. And that could be a teacher, a tutor, or a peers that were doing that, as well as drop-in hours. So just-in-time support provided by drop-in times was really important to learners. And that's consistent with what we know about adult learning, that not only does learning need to be relevant, but it needs to be timely. So digital literacy acquisition, let's focus on helpers. Helpers lead the way. A human helper can be a teacher, a tutor, a peer, or someone else. A key finding from the study is that human helpers play a very important role in supporting learning. They discovered that adults, and this is not rocket science, right? Adults need patience, encouragement, and support to learn digital skills. And often, and this kind of speaks to something we'll talk about more, it wasn't what's usually called tech support. It wasn't technical knowledge people needed. So the helpers didn't have to be experts in technology. What people needed was patience, encouragement, and support. So helpers need to support the development of learners' confidence and self-efficacy as they become allies to learners, as they push learners towards independence, and offer encouragement, nurturing, and support. A kind of, you can do it, keep trying. Oh yeah, that didn't work. I know, try it again. I bet you could do it this time. So what we saw in this study was a cycle. As people make progress in acquiring digital literacy, they have an increased sense of confidence and self-efficacy, which in turn led them to integrate skills into their daily lives, which helped them to make further progress in acquiring digital literacy. So it became a cycle of benefit. And here is a learner who said this to us. Imagine living in an apartment with no windows, and then somebody comes and puts windows in. My life with the internet, it's about that different. So this is someone who really was transformed by learning how to access the internet. So helpers are, as this study found, helpers are very important in making the learner comfortable, personalizing the learning process or making it relevant, using digital tools for real life purposes, or helping the learners to do that, and setting and reaching new goals. Because as in that cycle, as the learner reached their goal of what they wanted to learn how to do, then they wanted to learn how to do more. I heard just the other day about a 94-year-old woman in an affordable housing organization. This wasn't part of this study, it's part of a different project I'm involved with. And she learned how to use a new tablet in this digital literacy program. And she's like, I want to learn how to do online banking. It's not what she came in for, but her goals changed as she learned and she grew. And that's pretty typical. Another example, an adult in a tutoring program in an affordable housing organization didn't know how anything online was relevant to her life. I've heard that from other learners as well. But her helper got to know her and learned what was important to her, found out that she really liked music. So this tutor showed her how to access music on YouTube. And then that made it relevant to her. That made technology and digital literacy relevant to her. And she decided that she wanted to learn more about what she could find online besides music. So relevance to one's own goals and interests and the contextualization that provides is really important, as found by this study. Okay, digital literacy acquisition or access to practice opportunities. Another finding in the Digital Literacy Acquisition Project is that learners are supported in their learning when they have the opportunity to get on the device and do it themselves. So this is in contrast to the model where the teacher does it and then the learner copies it exactly step by step and avoids mistakes. I mean, back in the old days, we were taught you avoid mistakes, but that's not what we've learned with digital literacy. You have to make mistakes because that's part of learning, because it's always going to be different. It's always changing. So you got to just jump in and make those mistakes. In the Digital Literacy Acquisition project, the learners were shown what to do, and then the learners on their own with the online materials did it themselves. They made multiple mistakes and learned from their mistakes. When they got stuck, the helper, the teacher, tutor, or peer, walked them through a solution and then left it to do themselves again. The helpers push learners toward independence and a mindset shift to make mistakes and try again. The helpers especially provided support and encouragement, but never did it themselves. They never took over that mouse or the touchpad. And it was important that the devices were in that space for the learner to use at that time. So the timeliness is important. Contextualized learning, where digital devices are needed to teach digital literacy. It's also important that learners are working on tasks that were important and relevant to them, whether social media, communicating by email, creating and sharing images, communicating by video conference, or learning new things on YouTube. It needed to be relevant to their own interests and contextualize in that. So this research demonstrated that for beginning learners, the study found that there's a learning path with pivotal learning moments. Along a trajectory of discovery and goal setting, beginning digital literacy learners first came to discover that they're not going to break it, right? I'm not going to break it, that discovery process is an important first step. You probably all heard that. I'm afraid I'm going to break it. After some time and support from a helper, the learner developed the confidence that I can do it. So some self-confidence is developed. And finally, like that adult who loved music, the learner came to discover that this is important to me, is another way to say relevance. And this learning path, in turn, supported further learning. So I think in what I've shared so far, there's some important implications for adult education programs. First of all, that human helpers, tutors, teachers, peers, are important to encourage and support digital literacy acquisition, especially when learners get stuck. Also, it's important to create opportunities to learn independently, to discover and make mistakes by doing things with digital devices in a supported environment. I've even seen cases where just-in-time support is provided by phone. So this idea that you don't want it when someone gets stuck, that they have nowhere to go, nothing to turn to. We don't want that to happen. And third, the learning must be relevant to learners and their goals and interests, as well as timely for those goals. In other words, learning digital skills must be contextualized. Okay, so before I move on and talk more about what states and programs can do, I want to kind of get your thoughts out in the world. And again, use your wonderful, the benefits that you have for each other, the expertise that you all can share. So you're all wonderful resources for each other. So let's reflect and respond on your successes. Please share in the chat something that you have done or seen that has been successful in supporting digital literacy acquisition in an adult education setting. Let's take a couple minutes. And again, we're going to keep this so you all have access to it. Share something that you've seen that's been successful. This one's a little harder. And also, this is a time you could ask me a question if you want to put it in the chat or raise your hand. Interesting about the helper who speaks her native language. So this research, it's not, I'm not reporting on it here, but this research found that learners preferred bilingual helpers, even if the language the person spoke wasn't the one they spoke. They didn't share a native language. They didn't share a non-English language. Isn't that interesting? Just being bilingual. So introducing a new tool and providing space at that time for experimentation, which has implications for devices that we'll talk about. Yes, thank you, Beverly. Excellent. Excellent. All right, so I'm going to let people keep putting stuff in the chat. Again, it's a contribution, it's a gift you give each other to share your expertise. And then I'm going to talk about, while you continue to put stuff in there, oh yeah, Jody's talking about using volunteers. Yeah. Excellent. Yep, perfect. Yeah. Oh yeah. Lisa, that's great. Google Meet, helping students to access assignments and navigate the Google Classroom. Excellent. Okay, that's great. This is gold, you guys. This is gold. All right, so while people keep doing that, what I want to talk about now is how can states and programs support digital literacy acquisition? We'll bring together the information that we've talked about so far. So one of the things is that programs need to move away from, and many of you already have, as shown by what you're putting in the chat, move away from computer or technology classes as standalone classes that provide computer skills, because those are decontextualized, right? Instead, it's better to integrate digital literacy within all the classes and programs. So thinking back to all the things that you do in a day that are digital, the thing that we started with this afternoon, all of our adult education students need to do those things too, as they're doing high school completion activities or strengthening their literacy skills or learning English or preparing for college or careers. This means that what it means to be literate includes the ability to use these digital technologies to do these literacy tasks. So again, looking back at our domains of the child's education or employment or education and training or health, we want to integrate digital literacy across all of the programs and curricula to cover all these different kinds of things that people need to be able to do. So many of the things that we're all doing in our ABE classes are done digitally in the world outside of our classrooms. We need to be doing them in digital formats inside the classrooms too, which I think many of you are doing already, but we'll talk a little bit about what that means. This includes life skills, workplace skills, academic skills, language skills, skills for health, etc. And we know from research that digital literacy is best learned in context. This means that it needs to be, again, integrated throughout, even in low literacy EL classes, as well as reading and writing in high school completion and college preparation classes. throughout those. I've worked with literacy level English learners, and it's totally possible to integrate digital literacy into those classes. Totally. All right, so people need the literacies for work and for so on. So let's talk a little bit about how can state directors and state staff support that. So first of all, to support professional development for instructors. A very important part of integrating digital literacy across programs and classes is to support professional development for instructors. I'm going to provide, or we have on your PDF, some great professional development for resources. But first, I want to tell you about some important aspects of professional development on this topic. So I've worked with many teachers across the country on the topic of integrating digital literacy, and here's some important things that I want to note. So like everyone else, instructors have a broad range of digital literacies themselves. The thing to remember is that integrating digital literacy into instruction means that teachers don't have to know how to do everything. Remember that everyone's a learner with technology. They just have to know how to facilitate learning. With digital literacy, teachers move from being the sage on the stage to the guide on the side, as I mentioned. And there's good models for how to do this in the professional development resources that I'll provide, that are on your PDF, but that I'm going to talk about a little bit. First of all, what you want to do under the use category is use technologies in professional development in the same way that technologies are used in your programs. So use the same digital tools that the students need to be able to use. Now, what I like to support is that these are free apps that their students can use outside of the classroom in their own lives. So the Google suite of software for writing, presentations, spreadsheets, and collaboration, flashcard apps for learning vocabulary items, the same learning management system that the other classes use, although it might be used somewhat differently. So the idea is to synchronize using the same technologies that your students use, have your teachers use those in their professional development as well. Second, create opportunities for extended professional learning. Support ongoing professional development so teachers who are integrating digital literacy across their courses have the support of each other as they design lessons, including encouragement when things don't work well. They're going to make mistakes. It's inevitable. Support a growth mindset in teachers as well as learners. Cohort models work really well as people work together over the course of a semester or a year as they're trying activities to see what works. Now, I'll be talking a little bit about two sets of resources that these images are on the slide, the teaching skills that matter and the integrating digital literacy into English language instruction. These are suites of materials that I'll be talking a little bit about in a minute. So third, under help, make tutors available to work with instructors and learners. So no matter how good teachers and learners get with digital tools that they use, there will always be a need for support. Whether expanded tech support, digital navigators, tutors, peer mentors, create programs so that individual helpers can come into the classroom to support teachers when they're using a new tool or doing something that's difficult. Just in time is the key, doing it when they need it. Also, create opportunities for teachers to have access to helpers for their own learning, because we're all learners when it comes to technology. And that's what it means, is our teachers, our program administrators, our tutors, as well as the people we usually classify as learners. With technology and digital literacy, we're all learners. Okay, and the last one is this fourth one, focus on, oh, that's funny how it says that. Focus on the task to be accomplished, not on what I call cool tools. I put that in air quotes, cool tools. One of the things that I've noticed in my many years of doing this work is that administrators and others tend to focus on the cool tools and what the tool can be used for rather than the task to be accomplished. And I think this is natural. This is a normal thing that anybody would expect to have happen. But it's a barrier for instructors who need to be able to focus on the task that needs to be done and what is the best tool to accomplish that task. Let's see. Oh, I thought of an example, because there's lots of examples, but the one that I thought of that might be useful for you all is when VoiceThread first came out. So that's a tool, right? When VoiceThread first came out, people were really excited about it, which is awesome because it's a great tool. And at the time when it first came out, it was free. It met the need of students to be able to record a presentation and get feedback from their peers or from their teacher and from their teacher. However, but then I started to see people say, oh, this is really cool. What else can I do with it? But then that flips the narrative in the wrong direction, right? We have things people need to be able to do, And so how do we help them do those? Not, this is a cool tool, what else can I do with it? It's like, I have a hammer, what else can I pound on? So that's not how we want to be able to flip that and keep it focused on what is it that the learners need to be able to do. So these, like I said, the teaching skills that matter and integrating digital literacy and English language instruction. So a few of these key resources. For instructors who work with English learners, there's an online course called Integrating Digital Literacy into Adult English Instruction that works really well as a book group or a facilitated course. Includes strategies for working with a variety of levels of English language learning, including low literacy learners. The course is organized into 4 units, each taking 2 to 3 hours to complete. There's also a companion digital magazine that's focused on designing lessons that are infused with digital literacy. And there's an issue brief that works well to introduce program administrators to an integration approach. So that's something to think about. Another set of resources, oh no, before I talk more about resources, I want to go back and talk a little bit about infrastructure. So what I'm talking about encouraging requires a lot more bandwidth, or it requires a lot more access to the internet, depending on how you want to think about that. So one of the things that states and staff need to pay attention to is providing infrastructure to meet the increased need. There hasn't almost ever been a program that I've worked with that didn't need to be able to provide more infrastructure. So there's a variety of ways to think about this. First of all, have devices that are part of every classroom so that learners and the teacher can use the devices to accomplish classroom tasks as they occur. So one of the things that Beverly talked about is the teacher having in the class, giving the time for the students to actually do the thing. So having devices available all the time in every classroom, I think needs to be happening more and more often. Second, have device sets. Another option, or another menu option would be to have device sets that can be brought into a classroom when the teacher knows that he or she is going to be using technology. However, they need to be equally available. I've seen so many cases where the ABE program didn't get them until the credit programs didn't need them. So they need to be equally available to credit and non-credit programs. Expand Wi-Fi capacity so that everyone can be on if people are using their own devices. And there are sometimes that it's fine for students to be able to use their own device if they have one, or they can share if they don't. But as we've seen, data caps and the expense of data is a real issue. So we need to have the Wi-Fi capacity so all students and faculty can be online at the same time. And that is almost always a problem. And it's not acknowledged enough. It really is a problem. So that's something to really be thinking about. Allow combinations of bring your own device and school provided devices. So having a menu of options of all of the things that I've described so far. And then the last thing I want to say about infrastructure is don't lock down the internet too much. I've seen quite a few programs that use a kind of K-12 model when it comes to security, and security is important, there's no question. But I think working with adults is different than working with children. And it's important for learners and teachers to be able to access the things that they need and not be able to access the things that they need. So there's some infrastructure suggestions that come out of what we talked about so far. All right, so we've talked about the need for helpers. Structurally, it's helpful to offer different kinds of support for both learners and teachers, a kind of menu of options again. And it's important that it be just in time. So offer just in time help for learners and for teachers. So another thing I've been doing this a long time. Another thing that I often run into is that when you have technology that's being used, that people think, oh, I don't need as many people. When the reverse is, when it's not true. The role of humans has changed, but it is not there. What we see is that different people need different kinds of supports. Tech support, and what we need to expand what is meant by tech support, because traditional tech support often excludes the exact kind of thing that teachers and helpers need. Being able to get on the Wi-Fi, being able to know how to use this app or that app, knowing how to try to get unstuck when you're stuck. So there's a variety of ways, but one suggestion is to offer different kinds of supports for different people. Also to increase help that is offered in, again, a menu of services. Have a menu of options, including drop-in, by appointment, and by telephone. And that could be tutors, that could be access to tutoring, it could be accessing a digital navigator or someone else. There's a variety of ways that that can happen. But it's all different kinds of questions, not a restricted set of questions. And then the third thing on just-in-time help is pair tutors with teachers, so that tutors, volunteered or paid, can support learners and teachers in classrooms by moving around the room when learners or teacher get stuck, if their peers can't help. This idea that you bring in more human helpers as you go. So that's important. Okay, so those are the kinds of things that have kind of come out of what I've talked about so far. Now, one of the things that many people who were in the last webinar asked about was curriculum and framework. So what are the things available in curriculum and framework options? And so I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about a resource that gives you a great overview of these. There are a variety of digital skill curriculum and frameworks out in the world, and there's a great review of them in this study called Digital Skill Sets for Diverse Users, a Comparison Framework for Curriculum and Competencies by Stacy Wedlake, Kara Lothian, David Keyes, and Chris Coward. And it was published in March of 2019 by the Seattle Digital Equity Initiative. Seattle is doing some amazing things. This reference is on your PDF, so you have access to it. This article, let's see, in this article, the authors review 9 different digital skills frameworks or curriculum and look at the skills in each of 10 categories. Now, it's important to note that OCTAE does not endorse these curriculum or framework options. There's no endorsements here. But I want to tell you what's here in this resource so that you can go get it if you need it. Okay, so the authors of this article identify components of digital literacy. So very much like I broke it down for you all, and they do it a little differently, but you can see the similarities. There are 10 categories, and they identify skills within each. So the category of workplace has 9 skills, privacy and security has 7 skills, online life has 11 skills, mobile 6 skills, lifelong learning 3 skills, information has 7 skills, gateway skills has 11 skills, device ownership includes 4 skills, creation includes 8 skills, and communication includes 8 skills. So although they define digital literacy somewhat differently than I have here, the elements of digital literacy that we've been talking about, basic, communicate and create, find and evaluate, are here. Problem solving is not, but I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute, but the rest are. Okay, so looking at, just to give you a couple snapshots so you know what's in this resource, the skills in each framework. The authors review all 6 frameworks in terms of the 10 categories of digital skills as they define them. The 6 frameworks vary somewhat in the number and type of digital skills that are included. For example, the essential digital skills has a total of 37 skills, where the North Star framework has 27 skills, and they're distributed differently across the different categories. Looking at the curricula, the authors review 9 curricula. I've only represented 6 here because of space. In terms of the 10 categories of digital skills, like the frameworks, the curricula have different numbers and cover different skills. For example, the Google Applied Digital Skills, it's kind of in the middle there, includes 3 communication skills, 5 creation skills, 4 gateway skills, 5 information skills, 5 workplace skills, as compared to the Microsoft Academy, which includes 4 creation skills, 1 device ownership skill, 1 online life skill, and 6 workplace skills. The really nice thing about this resource is that it describes and reviews all of the frameworks and curricula, but then it goes on to look at assessments that match up or not. That's one of the things they really look at assessment. So you've got the frameworks, curricula, and assessments all discussed in one place, which is really nice. And they talk about the type and availability of each of these. And the authors go on to make recommendations, and I'm going to give you the punchline. The best choice depends on many factors, and there isn't an easy answer for assessments. But this is a really great resource for states as you think about integrating digital literacy and sort of your approach to how you want to do that. This is a really great resource for you. Another great resource, and again, it got mentioned in the chat, is the suite of materials called Teaching Skills That Matter. This is a great resource because this is stuff you can draw in the suite of materials you can draw from as you work through your own professional development, as well as the other planning that you need to do. So in this suite of materials, they've identified the skills that matter to include adaptability and willingness to learn, communication, critical thinking, interpersonal skills, navigating systems, problem solving, see that it comes back in here, and processing and analyzing information. So these are the skills. And they've developed materials that integrate these skills into each of 5 topics, including civics education, digital literacy, financial literacy, health literacy, workforce preparation, and workforce preparation. Sorry, I'm trying to get this done so we get to the end. Now, in the suite of materials on digital literacy, each of these blue blocks represents a resource that you can use for professional development or for developing and integrating the digital literacy into the programs. So there's an issue brief, there's best practices, there's lesson plan on workplace safety, a lesson plan on social media, some writing about project-based learning and problem-based learning, as well as integrated and contextualized instruction and annotated instructional resources and references. There are also, in the Links resource collection, there are some useful resources here as well. Digital Equity, Exploring This Modern Civil Right, HyperDocs for Adult Educators, North Star Digital Literacy Assessments, which is one of the best resources in the world. And from digital literacies to digital problem solving, expanding technology-rich learning opportunities for adults. This is also really helpful to push digital literacy up into that problem solving space instead of just staying at the more basic level. So these are all the things that are available on your PDF. I just want to call out that there's some online links courses that are great book groups for I like to use them as book groups. And so those are the ones that I've mentioned everything so far except for there's a Links Integrating Technology into the Adult Education Classroom online links course that I haven't mentioned yet. And then there are other resources as well. So there's many of the articles that I've mentioned today, as well as digital literacy resources for teachers, 2 of which are GCF Learn Free and Google Applied Digital Skills. Those are 2 really good resources for teachers themselves as they bring digital literacy into their classrooms. Other resources that I've also mentioned in this presentation are linked on your PDF. The Digital Navigator Toolkit. There's the Digital Literacy Acquisition and Equity Research Hub that lists the research findings that I talked about, and the National Digital Inclusion Alliance. So that's really helpful. All right, so I want to thank you. That last part, I went a little fast, I'm sorry, but most of it's on your PDF. I just wanted to tell you what it was about. I wanted to thank you very much for your time and your attention. If you want to email me, I'm happy to answer questions. My email is harriska@pdx.edu. I'm happy to answer questions, and I'm really excited to go back and look at what you have in the chat, all those wonderful suggestions, this goal that you have as ideas for each other, things that have worked for you or not worked for you in your state. So thank you so much for your time and attention. And I want to turn it over to Marcella so she can talk with you about what will be most useful to you going forward. All right, Marcella.
Great. Thanks so much, Kathy. And actually, we are going to be looking in just a moment at what is coming next. But I wanted to share just really quickly, sorry. I wanted to share a quick disclaimer. Kathy shared some incredible information, but I did want to make sure that everyone knew that this presentation was produced and funded in whole with federal funds from the U.S. Department of Education under contract number GS10F0112J with the American Institutes for Research, AIR. Carolyn Lambola serves as the contract officer's representative. The content of this presentation does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of the U.S. Department of Education, nor does the mention of trade names, commercial products, or organizations imply endorsement by the U.S. government. So with that, I do want to have us look ahead to next month's webinar. It will be on equity and next steps, specifically looking at the local context. Our webinar in March looked at this, and we want to see how things are going and how you are engaging your locals. So that will take place on June 30th from 3:30 p.m. to 4:45 p.m. So please note Eastern. It's a slight shift where we're 30 minutes later than our usual session, but like always, it will be 75 minutes. And that will be 12:30 p.m. Pacific to 1:45 p.m. Pacific. And we invite you to register. And we'll make sure to stick that the link for that in the chat. While you're as we're wrapping up, one question we have for you is, what questions do you have to make sure that we're meeting your needs? Please type into the chat. What questions about this topic do you want addressed in our next webinar? What questions do you still have about equity and how to support your locals? If you have any questions, again, please feel free to put those in the chat. My apologies. Okay, Claudia Fernandez, I see you have your hand up. I apologize if you want to unmute yourself for a moment.
Oh, she's asking, how can we use community-based organizations?
Oh, perfect. Okay, great. We will pass that question along. Thanks, Claudia. We'll pass that question along to our presenter. Great. Okay, so if there are no other questions, I want to thank Kathy again for sharing with us all the wonderful information. Thank you, Kathy. And Kathy Harris's email address again is Harriska, HARRISKA @pdx.edu. All right.
All right. I want to thank everyone for joining us for today and for our speakers, and we hope to see you on future events. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.